Jungkook's ring slipped off accidentally during an unexpected moment, but Taehyung saw it, said nothing, and everything changed after that. The ring hit the polished studio floor with a faint metallic sound, barely loud enough to interrupt the music, yet sharp enough to cut through the silence in the rehearsal hall. It rolled once, twice, catching the overhead lights like it wanted to be seen, before stopping right in the middle of the space between them. Jungkook froze. He didn't move right away. His breath became shallow, his fingers instinctively curling as if the ring were still there, still safe, still hidden. But it was. It was lying out in the open, exposed, reflecting everything he had tried not to think about. Taehyung had seen it. He stood just a few steps away, his shadow stretching across the floor toward the ring, but he didn't bend down to pick it up. He didn't react the way anyone else would have. No teasing, no jokes, no surprised laugh, just silence. "You dropped something," someone murmured from behind Jungkook. Jungkook didn't turn around. He already knew who it was. For a moment, time felt distorted. The music had stopped, the dancers were waiting for the next count, the room was full of people, but it felt like only the two of them existed in that space. The ring wasn't supposed to be there. It wasn't supposed to fall. It wasn't supposed to be seen. Jungkook finally bent down and picked it up slowly, brushing imaginary dust off the surface. It was a simple ring. No diamonds, no engraving, nothing that screamed importance. And yet in his hand, it felt heavier than anything he had ever worn. He slipped it back onto his finger deliberately, as if the action itself could erase what had just happened. "I saw it," Taehyung said quietly. Jungkook looked up. Their eyes met, and something in Taehyung's expression made Jungkook's chest tighten. There was no accusation there, no anger, no curiosity, just a calm, unreadable stillness, the kind that hurt more than shouting ever could. "It's nothing," Jungkook muttered. "It's just loose." Taehyung nodded once. Then he walked past him. Not a single extra word. But that silence followed Jungkook for the rest of the day. They hadn't talked properly in weeks, not since the argument at the airport, not since the blurry headlines, the rumors, the so-called insiders who claimed to know everything about their lives. Neither of them had denied anything. Neither of them had confirmed anything either. Jungkook had hoped that day would be normal, just practice, just choreography, just music, sweat, and routine. But the ring had other plans. As rehearsal resumed, the dancers moved, the beats dropped, the mirrors reflected familiar shapes, but Jungkook couldn't focus on any of it. His eyes kept finding Taehyung's figure across the room. Controlled, precise, distant. Taehyung didn't look back even once. Something had shifted. Jungkook felt it in his bones. This wasn't the same silence they had shared before. This was different. This was the kind of silence that knew something and chose to keep it, and that scared him more than any argument ever had. He remembered buying the ring. He had gone alone, hoodie pulled low, heart racing like he was doing something illegal. It wasn't meant for fashion. It wasn't for show. It was something he had bought on impulse, something he couldn't fully explain even to himself. It was a reminder of what he couldn't say out loud. Not even now. Especially not now. The more he moved, the more the ring pressed into his skin, as if it were punishing him for letting it fall, for letting it be seen. Every movement felt heavier, tighter, like the ring was trying to make itself known. After practice ended, Jungkook stayed behind under the excuse of stretching. The others left one by one, laughing, checking their phones, talking about dinner plans. He didn't move. He was waiting. Taehyung always forgot something. His water bottle, his phone, his jacket. Right on time, the door opened again. Taehyung stepped inside quietly, scanning the room until his eyes landed on the bench where his phone was resting. Jungkook stood with his back turned, pretending not to notice him. "You left this," Jungkook said, holding it out without turning around. Taehyung took the phone. Their fingers almost touched, almost. Then silence again. Taehyung walked toward the door, paused, and spoke without turning back. "You didn't drop it." Jungkook blinked. "What?" "The ring," Taehyung said softly. "It didn't fall by accident, you twisted it off." Jungkook turned around, ready to deny it, ready to explain, ready to say anything. But Taehyung was already gone. The door clicked shut. Jungkook stood there alone, staring at his hand. The ring reflected the dim studio lights, calm and quiet, like it had done nothing wrong. He tried to remember the moment clearly. But his mind betrayed him. It replayed the scene not as an accident but as a choice. His thumb rotating the ring, his hand hovering near his pocket, the brief hesitation before letting it go. Maybe he had wanted Taehyung to see. Maybe he was tired of hiding. Maybe he didn't want to be alone with it anymore. But what mattered now wasn't how it fell. It was Taehyung's reaction. He had seen it. And he had said nothing. That silence felt like a door. The silence didn't end when Taehyung left the studio. It followed Jungkook home, slipped into the elevator with him, sat beside him in the car, and stayed in the room even after the lights were off. It wasn't loud, but it was heavy, pressing against his chest like something unfinished. He barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the ring rolling across the floor again, the way it had caught the light, the way Taehyung had looked at it without touching it, the way he had known. The next morning, Jungkook woke up with the ring still on his finger. He hadn't taken it off. He couldn't. It felt like removing it now would mean admitting something he still didn't know how to say. Their schedules overlapped all week. Dance practice, recording sessions, interviews, same rooms, same hallways, same people. But somehow there was a new distance between them, subtle enough that no one else seemed to notice, yet impossible for Jungkook to ignore. Taehyung was still polite, still professional, still smiling when required. But he wasn't close. He didn't sit next to Jungkook anymore, didn't tease him during breaks, didn't casually lean over his shoulder to watch his screen. The small habits that had once felt natural were suddenly gone, as if someone had carefully erased them. It was worse than fighting. At least fights meant something still existed to break. During a break in rehearsals 2 days later, Jungkook found himself alone in the hallway outside the practice room, scrolling through his phone without actually reading anything. He looked up when he heard footsteps. Taehyung was walking toward him, holding 2 cups of coffee. For a second, Jungkook's heart jumped. Then Taehyung walked past him and handed one of the cups to a staff member instead. Jungkook laughed quietly to himself, a sound that didn't reach his eyes. That night, he finally couldn't take it anymore. He waited until most of the staff had left and found Taehyung sitting alone in the dressing room, scrolling through his tablet. The room was dim, lit only by the mirror lights and the faint glow from the hallway. "Can we talk?" Jungkook asked. Taehyung looked up. Not surprised, not annoyed. Just calm. "About what?" Jungkook swallowed. "You know what." Taehyung was quiet for a moment, then set his tablet down. "Okay." That was it, no hesitation, no resistance. And somehow, that scared Jungkook more than if Taehyung had said no. They stood there facing each other, the space between them filled with things neither of them had said out loud. "It really was an accident," Jungkook said finally. "The ring, I didn't mean to drop it." Taehyung studied his face carefully, as if deciding how honest he was allowed to be. "I didn't say it was. But you said I twisted it off. I said it didn't feel like an accident." Jungkook frowned. "What's the difference?" "The difference," Taehyung said softly, "is intention." The word hung in the air. Jungkook looked down at his hand. The ring felt tighter than usual, like it had shrunk overnight. "I didn't plan it," he said. "I wasn't trying to make a statement." Taehyung nodded slowly. "I know." That wasn't the answer Jungkook expected. You do. Yes, Taehyung said. You don't do things like that on purpose, not big things. You pretend they don't exist until they force you to look at them. Jungkook's chest tightened. That's not fair. Taehyung smiled faintly. It's very fair, it's you. Jungkook opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. Because Taehyung wasn't wrong. Why didn't you say anything that day? Jungkook asked. Taehyung's expression shifted just slightly. What was I supposed to say? I don't know anything, you just walked away. Because if I said something, Taehyung replied, you would have lied. Jungkook froze. I wouldn't. You would have said it was nothing, Taehyung continued calmly. You would have said it didn't mean anything. You would have made it smaller than it was so you wouldn't have to deal with it. The silence between them thickened. That's not true, Jungkook said, but his voice wasn't strong. Taehyung looked at him gently. Then tell me what it means. Jungkook's breath caught. He stared at Taehyung, his mind suddenly empty. There were 1,000 explanations inside his head, but none of them felt safe enough to say out loud. I don't know how, he said. Taehyung nodded, as if he had been expecting that answer. That's the problem, he said. You've been wearing something you can't explain, and you're surprised it finally slipped. Jungkook laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. You make it sound like it's alive. In a way, it is, Taehyung replied. It represents something you're carrying, and you've been pretending it doesn't have weight. Jungkook leaned back against the table behind him, rubbing his face. You think I'm hiding it. I know you are. Jungkook looked up sharply. From who? Taehyung didn't answer right away. From everyone, he said eventually, but mostly from me. The words landed harder than Jungkook expected. I'm not hiding you, he said quickly. Taehyung's gaze didn't waver. You take it off when cameras are around. That's different. How? Jungkook hesitated. Because people talk, they notice things, they turn everything into something it's not. And what is it then? Taehyung asked. Jungkook opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Taehyung exhaled slowly. See. The room felt suddenly smaller. I'm not ashamed, Jungkook said. That's not what this is. Then what is it? Taehyung asked, his voice still calm but softer now. Jungkook's shoulders slumped. Fear. Taehyung blinked. Of what? Of losing control, Jungkook admitted. Of people deciding things for me. Of headlines, of theories. Of becoming something I can't undo. Taehyung listened quietly. And where do I fit into that? He asked. Jungkook looked at him, really looked at him. At the way Taehyung's hands were folded in front of him. At the way his eyes weren't angry, just tired. You're the part I don't know how to protect, Jungkook said honestly. Taehyung's lips parted slightly. Protect me from what? He asked. From the world, Jungkook replied. From everything that comes with being close to me. Taehyung smiled sadly. So you protect me by pretending I'm not. Jungkook flinched. That's not what I meant. But that's what it feels like, Taehyung said. You wear it when you're alone. You hide it when anyone can see. You keep me in private and erase me in public. Do you know how that feels? Jungkook's throat tightened. Like what? Like I'm real only when it's convenient. The words hit deep. Jungkook stepped forward instinctively. You're always real to me. Then show it, Taehyung said quietly. They stood there just a few feet apart, both breathing a little heavier than before. Jungkook glanced down at the ring again. What if I told you, he said slowly, that I wear it to remind myself of you? Taehyung's eyes widened just a fraction. Then I'd ask, he replied, why does it keep falling off when I get too close? Jungkook felt something break open inside his chest. Because I don't know how to hold on without breaking everything else, he whispered. Taehyung was silent for a long moment. Then he stepped forward and gently took Jungkook's hand, not romantically, not dramatically, just enough to make the contact real. Then maybe, Taehyung said softly, you shouldn't wear it until you're ready to stop dropping it. Jungkook looked at him, searching for anger. There was none. Just patience. Just exhaustion. Just someone who was still there. I'm sorry, Jungkook said. Not for the cameras, for you. Taehyung nodded once. I know. Jungkook slowly removed the ring and slipped it into the small inner pocket of his jacket. Not hidden, not worn. Just waiting. Will you stay? Jungkook asked. Taehyung met his eyes. Only if you let me. Jungkook nodded. And for the first time since the ring had fallen, the silence between them didn't feel like a wall. The next few days passed in a strange, careful rhythm. Nothing dramatic happened. No sudden confrontations. No big emotional scenes. Just small changes that felt heavier than they should have. Jungkook noticed Taehyung standing a little closer during rehearsals, but never close enough to touch. He noticed himself reaching for the ring in his jacket pocket more than he expected, as if his hand needed reassurance that it was still there, even if it wasn't visible. They talked more. Not about the ring, not about feelings, just about work, schedules, random things. But there was a different tone underneath it all, a quiet awareness that something important was sitting between them, unspoken but no longer ignored. One evening, after a long recording session, Jungkook stayed behind again. Not because he had an excuse this time. He simply didn't want to leave yet. Taehyung was sitting on the floor near the mirror, stretching, earbuds hanging loosely around his neck. Jungkook hesitated at the doorway before stepping inside. You're going to strain your back if you keep sitting like that, Jungkook said. Taehyung looked up and smiled faintly. You sound like my physical therapist. Jungkook laughed softly and sat down beside him. The space between them was small now, not intentional, just natural. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Taehyung broke the silence. You haven't worn it since that day. Jungkook's fingers twitched instinctively toward his jacket. No, he said, I haven't. Taehyung nodded, eyes focused on the floor. Does it feel different? Yes, Jungkook admitted. It feels lighter. Taehyung glanced at him. That's good, right? Jungkook considered it. I don't know. Sometimes it feels like I took something off. Other times it feels like I'm carrying more than before. Taehyung smiled slightly. That makes sense. Jungkook looked at him. Why? Because now you're actually aware of it. Jungkook exhaled slowly. You're very calm about all of this. Taehyung shrugged. I've had time to think. About what? About us, Taehyung said simply. The word us landed differently now. Not as a joke, not as something vague, but as something real enough to feel dangerous. And what did you think? Jungkook asked quietly. Taehyung didn't answer right away. He leaned back against the mirror, eyes tracing their reflections. I thought about how long we've been dancing around the same thing, he said. How we keep pretending we're confused, when really we're just scared of being honest at the same time. Jungkook swallowed. So what are we scared of? Taehyung looked at him then directly. Different things. Jungkook waited. I'm scared, Taehyung continued, that if I say everything I feel, you'll disappear. Not physically, just emotionally. That you'll retreat into silence again and I'll be left wondering if I imagined all of it. Jungkook's chest tightened. And you think I'd do that? Taehyung smiled sadly. You already have a few times. The honesty stung. Jungkook nodded slowly. You're right. Taehyung blinked, surprised. That was easy. Jungkook let out a breath. I'm tired of lying to myself. They sat there in quiet for a moment, the reflection of two people who looked calm on the outside and completely exposed on the inside. What are you scared of? Taehyung asked. Jungkook hesitated, then answered. That if I choose you, I won't know how to handle everything that comes with it, that I'll mess it up, that I'll hurt you without meaning to, that I'll lose parts of my life I'm not ready to let go of yet. Taehyung studied him carefully, and if you don't choose me. Jungkook didn't hesitate this time. Then I already know what I lose. The room felt suddenly warmer. Taehyung looked away, pressing his lips together as if holding something back. You make it sound simple. It's not, Jungkook said. It just feels clear. Taehyung laughed softly. Clear doesn't mean easy. I know. Another pause. Then Taehyung reached into his bag and pulled out a small object wrapped in tissue. He held it out between them. Jungkook stared at it. What is that? Taehyung unfolded the tissue. Inside was a ring. Not the same one, but almost. Same simple design, same silver circle, slightly thinner, almost like it had been made to match. Jungkook's breath caught. You had one too. Taehyung nodded, for a while. You never said anything. You never wore yours in front of me either, Taehyung replied gently. Jungkook looked at the ring in Taehyung's hand, then instinctively reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his own. He placed it on the floor between them. Two rings, side by side. Identical in intention, different in timing. I was going to wear it that day, Taehyung admitted. The day yours fell, I thought maybe if I showed you, you'd finally talk to me about it. Jungkook felt a wave of regret wash over him, and I dropped mine instead. Taehyung smiled faintly. Yeah, you really have a talent for dramatic symbolism. Jungkook laughed despite himself. Then the laughter faded. Why didn't you wear it after? Jungkook asked. Taehyung's voice softened. Because I didn't want to wear it alone. The words hit harder than any argument ever could. Jungkook stared at the two rings on the floor, then slowly picked up his own. He turned it between his fingers, feeling the familiar weight, the familiar cold. Do you still want to? He asked quietly. Taehyung looked up. Want what? To wear it, Jungkook said, together. Taehyung hesitated just for a second, then nodded. Yes, but only if you're not going to hide again. Jungkook took a deep breath. I won't, he said, not from you. Taehyung's eyes searched his face. Not just from me. Jungkook understood what he meant. He slowly slid the ring back onto his finger. Not rushed, not dramatic, just real. Taehyung watched him closely, then slipped his own ring on as well. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Nothing had changed in the room. Same lights, same mirrors, same silence. But everything felt different. This doesn't fix everything, Taehyung said quietly. I know, Jungkook replied. It's just a start. Taehyung smiled. Starts are the scariest part. Good thing I've already been scared for a while, Jungkook said. Taehyung laughed softly. Then his smile faded slightly as his phone buzzed in his hand. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted. What is it? Jungkook asked. Taehyung showed him the phone. A blurry photo. Jungkook's hand resting on a table. The ring visible. Posted online. Already circulating. Jungkook felt his stomach drop. That was fast. Taehyung nodded. It always is. They looked at each other. This time, there was no silence filled with doubt. Only a new question. Not whether they were ready. The photo spread faster than either of them expected. By the time Jungkook opened his social media, the image had already been reposted hundreds of times. Fan accounts zoomed in, circled the ring, compared it to older clips, old screenshots, old moments that suddenly felt suspiciously intentional. Jungkook stared at his phone, thumb hovering over the screen. This is exactly what I was afraid of, he murmured. Taehyung sat beside him on the couch, his own phone buzzing nonstop. He didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked resigned. It was going to happen eventually. Taehyung said. You can't keep something real hidden forever. Jungkook let out a breath that sounded more like a laugh. I was hoping I could. Taehyung turned to him. Why? Jungkook frowned slightly. Because once people notice, they don't just observe. They create stories. They connect dots that may not even exist. They turn feelings into content. Taehyung's expression softened. And what if some of the dots do exist? Jungkook didn't answer immediately. He scrolled through a few comments. Some were excited, some were supportive, some were joking. Others were already crossing lines, speculating, assuming, claiming ownership over something they didn't understand. Jungkook locked his phone and leaned his head back against the couch. I don't like this part, he admitted. Taehyung watched him quietly. But you like the part where you don't feel alone. Jungkook glanced at him. That's not fair. Taehyung smiled faintly. It's honest. Jungkook sighed. You're really good at that lately. I've had practice, Taehyung said, watching you avoid it. Jungkook nudged him lightly with his shoulder. You're enjoying this too much. Taehyung laughed softly, then grew serious again. What are you thinking right now? Jungkook hesitated. I'm thinking about how once this gets big enough, we won't control the narrative anymore. Taehyung nodded. We never really did. That's the scary part. Taehyung studied him for a moment. You're not scared of people knowing, he said. You're scared of people deciding for you. Jungkook looked at him surprised. Yeah. Taehyung smiled gently. Then don't let them. Jungkook raised an eyebrow. How? By deciding first, Taehyung replied. The words settled in Jungkook's chest. Deciding first. Not reacting, not hiding, not waiting for damage control. Choosing. That sounds very simple when you say it, Jungkook said. Taehyung shrugged. Simple doesn't mean easy, but it's still a choice. Jungkook leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. What if I choose and it ruins things? Taehyung answered without hesitation. Then at least it was real when it existed. Jungkook turned to him sharply. You're okay with that? Taehyung met his gaze. I'm more okay with that than with pretending. The room went quiet again. Not the heavy silence from before. This one felt honest. Jungkook looked down at his hand. The ring caught the light from the lamp, small and unremarkable to anyone else, but suddenly the most meaningful object he owned. You know, he said slowly, I've worn this ring for months, and the first time it really scared me was when it fell. Taehyung tilted his head. Why then? Because when it was on my finger I could pretend it was just a habit, Jungkook replied. But when it rolled away, I realized how easily I could lose it, or choose to drop it. Taehyung's eyes softened. And you didn't? No, Jungkook said quietly, I didn't. Taehyung smiled, not wide, not playful, just sincere. Then maybe you already decided, he said. Jungkook let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That night, they didn't talk about social media again. They ordered takeout, sat on the floor, shared food like they always had. The difference was in the way their knees touched and didn't move away. In the way Taehyung leaned his head lightly against Jungkook's shoulder without checking who might see. Small things, but they felt big. Later, when Jungkook checked his phone again, the ring had become trending in multiple fan communities. Theories were getting more detailed. Old interviews were being reanalyzed. People were connecting moments Jungkook himself had forgotten. He showed Taehyung one of the posts. They think it's a couple ring, Jungkook said. Taehyung glanced at it. Is it? Jungkook paused, then smiled. Yes. Taehyung looked at him, surprised. You didn't even hesitate. Jungkook shrugged. I'm tired of hesitating. Taehyung laughed softly. That's new. Don't get used to it, Jungkook said. I'm still me. Taehyung smiled. That's the version I want. Jungkook stared at him for a moment, then said quietly, You know what scares me more than the headlines? Taehyung shook his head. What? That one day, you'll get tired of waiting for me to be brave. Taehyung's expression shifted. He reached out and took Jungkook's hand, intertwining their fingers gently. I'm not waiting for you to be brave, Taehyung said. I'm watching you learn. Jungkook's throat tightened. And if I mess up again? Taehyung smiled softly. Then we talk again like this, not like before. Jungkook nodded. Deal. For the first time in a long time, Jungkook felt something unfamiliar but comforting. Not certainty. Not control. Just trust. The next morning, their company issued a vague statement about respecting artists' privacy and not speculating about personal items. It was standard, polite, empty. But Jungkook didn't feel the need to hide the ring anymore. He wore it to rehearsal. Not intentionally displayed. Not hidden. Just there. Taehyung noticed immediately. Their eyes met across the room. No words. Just a shared look that said, I see it, I see you. Later that day, during a break, one of the members joked, You've been wearing that ring a lot lately. Jungkook's heart skipped. He glanced at Taehyung for just a second. Taehyung didn't react, didn't tense, didn't look away. He just waited. Jungkook smiled and said, Yeah, I like it. That was all. No explanation. No joke. No excuse. And somehow, it felt more powerful than any statement he could have made. Because for the first time, Jungkook wasn't wearing the ring to remember something. He was wearing it because he had finally stopped pretending it meant nothing. After that day, everything felt different in ways Jungkook couldn't fully explain. Nothing had officially changed. Their schedules were still packed. Cameras still followed them. The world still saw them as the same people they had always been. But internally, something had shifted, like a quiet agreement that no longer needed constant proof. Jungkook noticed it in the smallest moments. In the way Taehyung waited for him after rehearsals instead of leaving first. In how their conversations felt less guarded, less filtered. In how silence between them no longer felt like something to escape, but something to share. The ring stayed on Jungkook's finger. Not as a statement. Not as rebellion. Just as truth. And for the first time, it didn't feel heavy. One evening, they were sitting in the studio lounge, both too tired to talk much. Music played softly from a speaker in the corner. The kind of slow, ambient track that made time feel stretched. Taehyung was lying on the couch, head resting on Jungkook's thigh, scrolling lazily through his phone. You're very comfortable, Jungkook said. Taehyung hummed, You didn't complain. That's because I'm scared to move. Taehyung smiled faintly, Good. Jungkook looked down at him, You're enjoying this. Yes, Taehyung replied without hesitation. Jungkook laughed quietly. You're not even pretending to be subtle anymore. I was subtle for years, Taehyung said. I'm tired. The honesty made Jungkook's chest tighten again. He ran his fingers lightly through Taehyung's hair, not thinking too much about it. The gesture felt natural, like something his body had always known how to do. Taehyung closed his eyes. See, Taehyung murmured, This is the part I wanted. Not headlines, not theories, just this. Jungkook swallowed. You could have had this earlier. Taehyung opened his eyes and looked at him. No, I could only have this version of you now. Jungkook didn't argue. Because he knew it was true. That night when Jungkook went back to his room, he found himself staring at the ring again. But this time, not with anxiety. With curiosity. He thought about all the moments he had almost said something, almost reached out, almost been honest, all the times fear had convinced him that waiting was safer than choosing. And yet here he was. Nothing had collapsed. Nothing had ended. If anything, things felt more stable than they had in a long time. The next week, during an interview, one of the hosts casually asked, "You guys seem closer these days. Anything different behind the scenes?" Jungkook felt the familiar instinct to deflect rise in his chest. He glanced at Taehyung. Taehyung didn't nod, didn't signal, didn't pressure him. He just looked calm. Present. Jungkook smiled at the host. "We've always been close, we're just better at it now." The host laughed, satisfied with the vague answer. But Taehyung looked at Jungkook like he had just said something much bigger. Later, when they were alone, Taehyung asked, "What did you mean by that?" Jungkook shrugged, "Exactly what I said." Taehyung studied him. "You're not running anymore." Jungkook exhaled. "I think I finally got tired of chasing myself." Taehyung smiled. "I like this version of you." Jungkook looked at him. "You've said that before." "And I'll say it again," Taehyung replied, "until you believe it." Jungkook laughed softly. "I'm starting to." Days turned into weeks. The ring became less of a mystery and more of a quiet constant. Fans still speculated, of course, but the chaos softened. It became background noise instead of a threat. What mattered more was how Jungkook felt. He felt lighter, more grounded, more honest than he had been in years. One night, after a long day, they found themselves sitting on the rooftop of their building, city lights stretching endlessly below them. Taehyung leaned against the railing, looking out at the skyline. "Do you ever think about the future?" Taehyung asked. Jungkook joined him. "All the time." "And does it scare you?" Jungkook thought for a moment. "It used to, now it feels open." Taehyung smiled. "That's a nice word for it." Jungkook glanced at him. "What about you?" Taehyung's expression softened. "I used to imagine the future alone. Now I imagine it with someone who keeps dropping important things." Jungkook laughed. "I dropped it once. And somehow it changed everything," Taehyung replied. Jungkook looked down at his hand, the ring reflecting the city lights. "You know what's funny?" Jungkook said quietly. "What?" "If it hadn't fallen, I might have kept pretending forever." Taehyung nodded. "Sometimes accidents are just truths that get tired of waiting." Jungkook smiled at that. They stood there in silence, shoulders touching, not needing to say anything else. For the first time, Jungkook didn't feel like he was holding onto something fragile. He felt like he was finally holding onto something real. And this time, he wasn't afraid of letting the world see it. Not because he wanted attention, but because he no longer felt the need to hide what already felt like home. Before continuing, it is important to pause for a moment and look back at everything that has been read so far with calm and clear awareness. The entire narrative presented above, including all scenes, dialogues, emotions, conflicts, relationships, and character development, is a work of pure fiction. It is created solely from imagination for the purpose of storytelling, emotional exploration, and entertainment. This story is not a report of real events, not a reflection of factual situations, not a form of news, and not a representation of the real lives, personalities, or experiences of any individual in the real world. Every moment in this narrative exists only within the boundaries of fiction. Although some characters may appear to resemble public figures, and some names may sound familiar, this resemblance is purely coincidental and unintentional. The characters in this story are not meant to portray, describe, or interpret real people, and the narrative does not claim to reveal any truth about their personal lives, emotions, relationships, or experiences. The story does not carry factual authority, documentary value, or informational reliability of any kind. It is not evidence, not testimony, not a source of real-world insight, and not something that should be used as reference for understanding actual individuals or situations. It can be natural as readers to feel emotionally connected to fictional characters, to imagine what it would be like if certain moments were real, or to wonder how such situations might feel if they truly happened. Questions like, what if this were real? Or why does this story feel so emotionally convincing? Are part of how storytelling works. Fiction invites empathy, curiosity, and reflection, but it is essential to remember that emotional impact does not equal factual truth. A story can feel real without being real, and it can move us deeply without representing reality in any literal sense. This disclaimer also serves as a reminder to engage with this narrative ethically and responsibly. The story should not be shared, quoted, or reframed as information, facts, rumors, or hidden truths about real people. It should not be used to speculate about personal lives, to fuel gossip, to justify assumptions, or to attack or defame anyone. In an era where fictional narratives can easily be misunderstood, taken out of context, or spread as if they were real, it becomes especially important to maintain critical awareness and media literacy. Enjoy the story as a story, not as a claim about the world. The purpose of this narrative is to explore emotions, relationships, internal conflicts, and human vulnerability through fictional characters in a safe, imaginative space. It is a creative exercise, not an attempt to blur boundaries between fiction and reality. Any similarities to real people, real events, or real situations exist only in the mind of the reader and are not intended by the author. The narrative does not aim to represent, judge, or define any real individual, and it carries no statement about their identity, choices, or private life. Think of this story as a mirror for feelings rather than a window into reality. It is a place to reflect, to empathize, and to experience a narrative journey without attaching it to real-world identities. The value of this text lies in its emotional resonance and symbolic meaning, not in its factual accuracy. As long as it remains within the realm of fiction, it can be appreciated freely, safely, and thoughtfully. With that understanding, and with the shared agreement that everything here exists only as imagination, the narrative can now continue as what it truly is. A fictional story meant to be read with awareness, emotional openness, and a clear boundary between storytelling and reality.